can we do something useful? So what have we done so far? We've looked at compounds that switch their character, aromatic to anti-aromatic, non-aromatic to aromatic. And we're sort of learning the rules for that switching. So one of them is if you protonate, it becomes easier to do that switching. So can we use that as a trigger? So can we make molecules that are on and off? And what function do we want to elicit to control in that manner? So I'm going to give one example that we're working on, and that involves photoacoustic imaging. So I think we're all more or less familiar with ultrasound. So what's ultrasound? It's sound beyond what you can hear. It's in clinical practice. If you're pregnant, for instance, almost every pregnancy you get that. Internal disease, you'll get an ultrasound. So what's that? How's that working? It's putting in sound and looking how it's reflecting back. Kind of a little bit like radar for people. Sound we can hear, ultrasound is beyond what our ears can hear. Photoacoustic imaging, we think could be a new technique that complements classic ultrasound. Ultrasound doesn't give you great sensitivity, but we think that by adding molecules and turning them on and off, we might be able to do something in that area. So this is a little complicated. What we're going to do is heat up a spot, first in mice, maybe ultimately in people, and then that heat will make a little cavitation, which will make some noise. So that all sounds very complicated. But this morning, I started by making coffee. And how do I make coffee? I take the coffee kettle, I hold it under the sink, and I fill it up with water. And then I put it up, plug it in, and it starts warming up. And if you've ever heated up a kettle electronically or on the stove, listen, it makes noise. You're heating up the water, it's starting to vibrate a little bit, it's cavitating. That cavitating, it expands, contracts, expands, comes out as noise. And we see that, hear that popping maybe in the summer. We let our cars out, they get kind of hot, right? Then we can cook an egg on the dashboard at Special in Texas. I once had a whole recipe book on food you can cook in your car in the summer in Texas, like ham and eggs and things like that. Anyway, the heating makes noise, just like your coffee. Instead of using a coffee pot, we're going to use a laser. And so we're going to take the laser, we're going to use that heat to make a spot. That's going to give local warming, and that'll come out as ultrasound. So we'll start with laser, that'll give a RF pulse. We'll get it formed, that'll go to an excited state. This is called a Jablonski diagram. Once you're in an excited state, it can go into the triplet, it can come back out as light, that's called fluorescence. Maybe you can't read that. It goes in a triplet, it can come out as light, as phosphorescence, or it can come out just heating as heat, thermal expansion. Thermal expansion, remember, just like the popping of our kettle, will make an acoustic wave. It's beyond what we can usually hear. And then we'll use ultrasound, which is beyond what we hear. And then we'll just use the typical ultrasound imaging. So for photoacoustic imaging, we don't want it to come out as light. We don't want it to go into the triplet. We want it to come out as heat. So we want to take our laser and we want to heat. And we want this to be done with red light, and of course, since we're so this proton coupled electron transfer, gamma to switching, we use to control photoacoustic imaging. And I love this cartoon because it's like a gullibility test. You put $1 in, then your gullibility, of course, is just a fancy word for being easily fooled. So for $1, you can test whether or not you're gullible. And guess what? You don't need a machine. Anybody want to give me $1? I'll tell you whether you're gullible. No takers, you guys are too smart. Okay, but it was worth a try. And anyways, can we use a laser to heat up our molecules and then switch them on and off? So one state you see it, one state you don't. And we're going to want to use light that goes through your body. So if I take my lovely green pointer and I put it against my skin, you don't see very much. All the blood absorbed it. Blood is red because it absorbed the blue-green light. All that was red. So we need to use red light. And I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I'd hide under the covers with my flashlight, right? And you'd hold up your finger. Ooh, red! How cool is that? And why is that? Because the blue-green light was absorbed by your blood, which left only red to go through. So what's the corollary? Means if I come with red light, I can get it deeper into your body. So to do this properly, I need a molecule that's bigger than a porphyrin, that has this aromaticity, so that it is absorbing not blue-green light, but the red light that the porphyrin in the blood did not absorb. And if I would do the normal light, it won't work. So this big molecule, one of our expanded porphyrins, was what we're going to test. And we had hoped that this would switch, just as I said, we add protons, we can switch from non-aromatic to aromatic, or from anti-aromatic to aromatic. That has a big change in the color. And we had hoped that we could do this at about pH 6. That's still my dream. Haven't gotten there. Why pH 6? Because cancer rapidly proliferating, it's outstripping everything, it becomes a reducing environment, and it becomes an acidic environment. So if I could have just a light-based technique to see whether or not you have a cancer, and by using our molecules, look pretty deep in your body, that would be a dream come true. Still a challenge? We have not met that challenge. Turns out this molecule, the best we have so far, switches at about pH 4, pH 3. And so Adam and Jinjing, we sat around and scratched our heads. Well, it's not going to help in the diagnosis of cancer. But it turns out, probably it's happening to you now. I'm droning on and on, your blood sugar is going down, you're getting hungry. When you get hungry, the pH in your stomach drops, becomes more and more acidic, so that you're getting ready to digest Dixie chicken or whatever you're going to have for dinner when I finally shut up. That drop in pH is about pH 3. So we decided we would test this, and we got a mouse volunteer. Jinjing's now back at Shenzhen, Southern China. Takes mouse volunteer, stick it in his ultrasound system. And what do we do? We now add our molecule, stick it in, and beforehand, no image. Put in our molecule, you start to get, and it gets brighter and brighter in time. Why? Because the mouse is getting more and more hungry. Okay, 15 minutes for us, we can tolerate that. But if you're, over time, your blood sugar goes down, you get more and more hungry, right? Your pH in the stomach is going down. And so, what happens if you have too much acid reflux? You take a Tums, a bicarb. And so we fed the mouse some bicarbonate, and it made it disappear. What's that do? Change the pH of the stomach, so it's more neutral. But over time, the mouse gets hungry again, and it comes back. So I don't think we can really solve the world's problems. We don't have a cancer detection system. But I can tell you if your pet mouse is hungry. There's some progress. Okay. Finally, I want to give a brief update on our Texafer drug discovery efforts, which is really where and why I'm probably here to chat with you. So this is really fundamental versus applied chemistry. So most of what we've talked about has been pretty fundamental, and this guy's going, just a reminder, deadline coming up soon, and the right brain, left brain, shut up, and so the question is, can hexagrams be good for something? And I'm much more on this side. Those of you who get to know me will realize I have inherited my mother's disorganizational skills. And the other way of putting that is, you probably studied delta G, right? Delta H minus T delta S. So you know that things can either be entropy driven or enthalpy driven. And so I'm a totally entropy driven chemist. It's lucky I can get my shoes on. Oh, with my lovely Halloween socks. Okay, so can hexagons be useful? Well, early on we found that they were easy to reduce. Dirk Cooley, now famous Say-Hi professor in Munich, showed that it was really easy to put electrons into hexaprin. That means it's easy to take them back out. So if you put an electron into hexaprin, oxygen will take it back out. But that electron had to go somewhere. And so it makes a reduced form of oxygen called superoxide. And that just mutates to peroxide, which is an apoptosis or programmed cell death trigger. And that was all coming out about the time we made this molecule. And so I teamed up with Richard Miller, early photo shown here, to start a company to try and progress this. And that sounds really simple and boring. This actual story is maybe a little different. So I was a senior in college, and I had a cold that never went away. And I had some ache under my arm, and my older brother was studying medicine, and older brothers are always slapping the younger brothers and sisters around, and he kept saying, oh, you gotta go get that checked out. And so finally, just to shut him up, I went and took chest x-ray on Thursday, Tuesday, staging laparotomy, and within 2 weeks I was on radiation therapy for stage 3B Hodgkin's lymphoma at age 20. It's a little older than you are, but still not so far from where you're sitting to feel the little shadow across your head. 3 years later, the disease relapsed, and I was assigned to a young Richard Miller, who was working on anti-idiotype antibodies that became the basis for all the antibody drugs through IDEC. And I kept going to checkups and whatnot, and I said, when I was coming for therapy as a grad student, he kept saying, why are you working on these porphyrins? How are you going to cure cancer with them? And we finally made hexaprin, which had these interesting redox properties, so we decided to start a company. And Richard quit IDEC to become CEO, and so the two of us did this based on this molecule. And the idea was that we could put gadolinium in the middle, and that would allow us to do MR imaging, and then maybe lutetium, which will allow us to control the excited state and make all these reactive oxygen species. And so this is way down in the lanthanide part of the periodic table. And I don't see a periodic table here. Fortunately, I always carry one with me. So can everybody see that? So way down the bottom of the periodic table, right in the middle, is an element called gadolinium. Losing my wallet. What's in my wallet? Not very much. So this could be good for MR imaging, and ultimately we focused on metastatic brain cancer. So the idea is that we would make these reactive oxygen species we'd be able to see, and after a few years of running around, we got venture capital money for that, and we started Pharmacycles. For a combination mostly of business, but some science, we ended up focusing on metastatic brain cancer. So this is cancer that's moved from other parts of your body into your brain. And unfortunately, after getting all the way through phase 3, we found Murphy's Law. And that's basically saying if something bad can happen, it will. And so this is an Irish expression. It's not really an expression of optimism, but the Hungarians have something that's similar. Today is worse than yesterday, but it's better than tomorrow. This is not the optimism we want here in Texas. But what happened, we got all the way through phase 3, so this was hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was rejected in 2007. What had happened is that 2 of the centers, so these big clinical trials, I'm a chemist, and once it goes to them, they took over 2 of the centers in Lille, France, waited almost 2 months till they put the patients on the clinical trial, and that was enough to skew the whole trial. And there was nothing in the protocol that said you couldn't do that, so that was sort of our mistake. Not saying don't do something stupid like turn left into oncoming traffic. Who does that? And as I said, when I was diagnosed within a week, I was in surgery and then on to therapy, so we take cancer very seriously. Anyway, that's what happened. And out of this gadolinium Texafen, which has a USAN name, Motexafen gadolinium, turned out to be exceedingly safe, at least as a cancer drug. And sadly, there's still no alternative treatment for metastatic brain cancer. And my brother-in-law passed away from this disease 5.5 years ago. All that mattered at the time was the statistics or p-value. And I, as a former cancer patient, I still find this hard to grasp because this was better than nothing. But that's how it was. And I knew we were in trouble because I was giving a talk in France. I got on the plane. Pharmaceutical stock was worth $20 a share. I got off the plane in Dallas, and it was trading at $1.50, and I go, this isn't good. And the CEO, I'm afraid, gentlemen, this doesn't call for a drink, but let's have one anyway. And of course, Homer Simpson says it better, and he goes, so alcohol, the cause of and solution to all life's problems. And I hope you're at the age where you're not doing this by experiment. I'm at the age where my blood sugar goes down, doesn't matter, but if my blood alcohol level goes down, I get really grumpy. We knew that biotech is a risk, and the minute we started this clinical trial, my former student, at Pharmaceutics, Darren Magda, was charged with finding a backup. And so Gilead was one of our, Peter Durbin started that, co-founder of that company. They went from triple helix DNA to antibiotics. So we knew, and one of the differences between academics, when you focus to try your research, you get your project done, published. You may have heard publish or perish. It's now so competitive, it's publish and perish. That's so different than in business, where your job is to find some success and put your ego aside. So Darren went around and he found a couple of backups. The first of that was an HDAC inhibitor. That actually did not work. The backup to the backup was a Burkitt tyrosine kinase inhibitor. Nobody wanted this molecule because it was a covalent and bind to the active site of that kinase, which puts phosphate and turns on the cancer. But we knew that in cancer, the options are death or try something. And that one turned out to be pretty good. What happened is the board kicked out Richard Miller. Bob Duggan, who had made money on robotic surgery, did a hospital takeover, fired Richard. I quit in protest because I'm not going to help this guy who saved my life, so I'm going to be loyal to him. And then this became a huge success. And the first approval came in 2013, and as you heard, this sold for a whole bunch of money. And this drug is being used to treat 40% of all leukemia patients. So, come what may, that's something that can't be sniffed at. And if you want to read this whole soap opera, I recommend this book. So this is after Miller and me left. I think I'm gone by page 18. Miller's gone by page 30. So Bob Duggan had no training in oncology, but he knew how to push business. And he had put $80 million of his own money into this company to keep it going. And then when it sold, he got $3 billion out of it. and he gave it to the Church of Scientology. So he's now the head of Tom Cruise. His money, he can do whatever he wants, but it's all totally soap opera. Oh, and he had fired a bunch of people, 2 of whom were so mad they went and started another company, and that company sold for $8 million. But if you succeed, it's good. Okay, so scientists, we never get any money, but I got a little bit of my lake house and some toys. So please come to Austin and have some fun. So what are we doing now? We're inspired by the fact that this shows good localization to cancer. That's been known in the porphyrin business for a long time, but it holds for Texarin and the gadolinium allows us to see it. And so this has been our inspiration to try and bring these back into clinical settings. So we all have goals, maybe young, ambitious. Your goal is to, I don't know, play football, win a Nobel Prize. My goal is to get one more compound into the clinical. So I'm a chemist, I have a PhD. PH we pronounce foot, like fake doctor. And if I can hand this off to the people doing clinics, like my older brother, that's MD, and that's pronounced money doctor. So that's my goal, is to get one more compound into the hands of the money doctors. So what are we doing? We're trying to take approved, FDA-approved drugs like cisplatin, which is basically glorified rat poison, and try and deliver it to a cancer. So the Texarin localizes, that's a combination of, for those who care, receptor-mediated endocytosis and enhanced permeation and retention effect. So now we're not going to try and use that for its own attributes, but rather just as a school bus to deliver these toxins, which normally would go all over the body. And for the subtleties, we're going to use platinum-4. That gets reduced to platinum-2, and the Texarin will help target. And so tumors are reducing because they outstrip their blood supply, and maybe the Texarin can help with the target. So platinum-4 gets to the cancer, gets reduced to platinum-2, then that does the canonical Steve Lippard DNA kinks, and he won the Cotton Medal here a few years ago. I came over to celebrate that. He hasn't won a Nobel Prize, but I hope he will. And so the question is, will Texarin help? So we knew that Texarin can bind reducing metabolites like ascorbate, hand that off maybe to platinum. I don't know if anybody knows what this is. It's a typewriter. And I'm so old I had to type my PhD. It took like 2 weeks just to type it. If you make a mistake, there's no backspace. You have to rip out the page and start again. And so finally the big day for my PhD came, put on the tie, walk in, and I heard Henry Taubman talking to my boss. There's 160 pages of typing. And Taubman goes, I think this is a pretty good dissertation. I read the first 16 pages. And no, I was pretty upset. And I asked afterwards, I said to my boss, Professor Taubman only read 16 pages. He goes, can you sign it? I go, yeah. Keep it. It's going to be worth a lot of money. Well, 3 months or 15 months, I can't remember, later, who wins the Nobel Prize? Henry Taubman. So all of a sudden, my attitude changed completely. Instead of his only reading 16 pages, he signed my dissertation. Why do you win the Nobel Prize? Something that we think is just obvious. Inner sphere versus outer sphere electron transfer. If bonds are actually touching, electrons move faster. But until we figure that out, nobody knew. And so that's just a reminder. And the idea is that maybe by using Texarin, we can help this electron transfer. Because here we can have binding. Texarin lives a long time in its reduced form. So we do this by MTT assay. You take a dye. If the cells are alive, it turns purple. And if they're dead, it stays clear. And you plot concentration versus percent. So the further this is over to the left, the more toxic your compound. And so if you take Texarin, not so good. You take platinum, not so good. You mix them together, much better. But that's not a drug. Drug, you want to have things all going together. So Greg and Jonathan stuck oxaliplatin in the 4-oxidation state. So this is a prodrug of an FDA-approved drug. Hits the reducing environment, falls out, gives an FDA drug. And so we think this all works. And here it's just the data that got us very excited. So we're doing something called patient-derived xenograft. This standard of care for ovarian cancer is one of these platinum drugs. This is a cancer that came from a lady who died of ovarian cancer. And the platinum drugs just did not work. And she donated her body to science. This cancer from her, that tumor, has never seen glass, never seen plastic, never been frozen. It's kept alive in a mouse. When it gets too big, they take a chunk and put it in a new mouse. So it's considered a reasonable model for clinic. And if you use saline, tumor grows like that. If you use the platinum drug, didn't work on her, and it didn't work in her cancer, no better than salt solution. But if you use our compound, then we're stopping the cancer growth, at least for a long time. And by the time all the other mice are dead, most of ours on our drug